blind, have low vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Louise, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the December 28th issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll begin with the cover story, which is about Kate Hudson. She says she's tired of being underestimated. Her vanity-free Song Sung Blue performance has awards season buzz. The article is by Brooks Barnes. Refusing to stay in her lane, Kate Hudson, long pigeonholed as a rom-com star, goes right to the heart in Song Sung Blue. She's a middle-aged, blue-collar amputee who sings backup in a kitschy Neil Diamond cover band. "I don't want to be a hairdresser," she says with a heavy Wisconsin accent. "I want to sing and dance." It's not exactly a role that shouts Oscar. At first glance, it reads more like Razzie bait. But the right actress in the right part, as played by Kate Hudson in the musical biodramedy Song Sung Blue, arriving in theaters on Christmas Day, the character, Claire, transcends her movie of the week attributes, so much so that Hudson could land in the Best Actress race in the Academy Awards. She has already been nominated for a Golden Globe for her performance. Through genuine word of mouth, not the publicist orchestrated prattle that often drives awards season consensus, Hollywood insiders are saying it's the best work of her career. There are performances that remind us what we already know, Clayton Davis, the chief awards editor at Variety, wrote in a column. And then there are performances that shatter our assumptions entirely, forcing us to reckon with the talent we'd somehow managed to underestimate. A talent, pigeonholed, is more precise. In 2001, when she was 22, Hudson was favored to win the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for her layered performance as the rock and roll muse Penny Lane in Almost Famous. She lost to Marcia Gay Harden, Pollock. Hudson then became a rom-com queen, starring in the seminal How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days with Matthew McConaughey, and the decidedly not seminal You, Me, and Dupree with Owen Wilson and Matt Dillon. In the years since, Hudson has largely been cinematic wallpaper, periodically popping up in a romantic comedy of uneven quality. She tried to show different sides of herself, appearing in the 2009 musical Nine and playing a socialite who accuses her black chauffeur of rape in the 2017 indie civil rights drama Marshall. In 2022, she received positive reviews for her turn as a narcissistic fashion mogul in Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. But studios kept pushing Hudson back into the rom-com lane. "Every time I tried to pivot, the industry continued to see me in a certain way," Hudson said in a recent video interview. "It's just the way the town works, how you're branded. You don't always get considered for things that you know you can do." At first, the same thing happened with Song Sung Blue. Hudson's agent sent her Craig Brewer's script in 2023. Based on a Truth is Stranger Than Fiction documentary of the same name, Song Sung Blue is the bittersweet story of a middle-aged couple, Mike and Claire Sardina, and their urge to entertain. Madly in love, they start a Neil Diamond tribute band in Milwaukee in the 90s. Mike, with his shirt unbuttoned to his navel, obviously, belts out rhinestone-wrapped anthems like Sweet Caroline and Forever in Blue Jeans. Claire plays keyboard and sings backup while smiling rapturously and sporting big hair. She's a former beautician, after all. They call themselves Lightning and Thunder. Ultimately, the Sardinas suffer personal setbacks, including the partial loss of her leg in a freakish accident which leads to depression and a painkiller dependency. I read it and I loved it, Hudson said. It had this old school crowd pleaser feel to it where you think it's going one direction and then it just tears your heart out. It entertains you and then it moves you. Brewer, who also directed Song Sung Blue, was interested in Hudson. They had discussed working together in the past. She has this wonderful approachability that translates onto the screen. Audiences root for her as one of them, Brewer said. I always felt that there was a dramatic movie in her where she could still touch into that accessibility, but really show people her range. Other actresses were also chasing the part, however. It's not like Kate was necessarily at the top of everybody else's list, Brewer said. Then came a fortuitous 2024 appearance on CBS News Sunday morning. Hudson had been booked on the show to promote her debut as a singer-songwriter, something that she told CBS had always been a dream, but that she had to push through self-doubt to achieve. Hudson said she had been dissuaded from releasing an album. "You're too old." And she spoke about writing a song for her eldest son, Ryder, who had recently left home for college. As she recounted the anecdote, Hudson broke down in tears. Hugh Jackman, whom Brewer had already cast as Mark Sardina, a.k.a. Lightning, happened to be watching. It struck him. In some ways, Hudson was Thunder, a mom with moxie who decided in her 40s to take a chance on herself, who refused to let her passion for singing shrivel into regret just because she was no longer young. With the shake of a tambourine, Hudson had the role. Good times never seemed so good. Hudson may be in her 40s, but she's not Milwaukee Beer and Brat's 40s. She's the movie star West Side of Los Angeles version, yoga-toned, cosmetically smoothed. Sometimes it's fun to have a forehead that doesn't move, Hudson said with a laugh. In 2013, when she was growing frustrated with her Hollywood options and looking for work that would keep her close to her young children in Los Angeles, she co-founded the activewear line Fabletics. The brand amplified her California cool image, which has lately been on display in Running Point, a breezily comedic Netflix series. Hudson plays a former party girl who suddenly gains control of an LA Lakers-type basketball team owned by her family. She's blasted as a Nepo crone in one episode, a funny line that perhaps functions as an in-joke. Hudson is Goldie Hawn's daughter. All of which makes Hudson's vanity-free performance in Song Sung Blue rather startling. Thunder has Pudge hanging over the top of her control-top pantyhose. Like most of us, she has bags under her eyes and long ago acquiesced to crow's feet. In a lot of scenes, Hudson goes without makeup. Multiple times she limps through the living room looking like bad breath smells. "I didn't get Botox for like a year," Hudson said. "There were no facials happening. No spa days, and I gained 15 pounds. Oscar voters love it when stars shed their glamorous personas. It shows artistic commitment. See McConaughey in Dallas Buyers Club, Charlize Theron in Monster, and a dozen others. But whether Hudson is able to break into the Oscar race depends in some ways on whether voters give the movie itself a chance. Neil Diamond's unapologetically earnest music can send intelligentsia noses skyward. Song Sung Blue also treats its blue-collar subjects with dignity, which is somewhat unusual for a Hollywood movie. The Sardinas live in a run-of-the-mill suburban house where yesterday's supper undoubtedly still hangs in the air. She makes her own clothes. He changes his own oil. These things aren't presented as evidence of a sad existence. It's the opposite. These people are resilient. It's not a cynical film, Hudson said. At some point, films started having to be cynical or crazy, depressing, or hard to watch in order to be considered art. She likened Song Sung Blue, which cost Focus Features an estimated $30 million to make, to Touchstone movies from the 1980s and 90s. Now largely dormant. The Disney-owned Touchstone made heartstring tuggers like Beaches and Dead Poets Society, and montage-heavy mainstream comedies like Pretty Woman and Sister Act. Brewer is known for Hustle and Flow, 2005, and Dolomite Is My Name, 2019, both of which explore the ennui of midlife. He said he pursued Song Sung Blue in part because lightning and thunder reminded him of performers he had encountered over the years in Memphis, where he lives. They're just a stone's throw away from unbearably cheesy, Brewer said. The kind where you're like, I don't know if I can watch this guy. But then they do a Journey song and you're like, oh wow, they're killing it. To prepare, Hudson watched YouTube videos of people with prosthetics. She also studied Claire in the Song Sung Blue documentary, paying particular attention to how she moved, shoulders and arms, and she loves her tambo, Hudson said. But she decided not to meet Claire Sardina, who lives outside Milwaukee and still performs, before filming began. I think Craig worried that I would get too attached to her, Hudson said. He wanted me to lean on my instincts. The two eventually met when Sardina and her daughter visited the set. For the record, Thunder approves of her portrayal. Kate did such an amazing job, especially during the sad moments, and I've definitely had my share of those, Sardina said in a video call. I was in tears a lot while watching her. We had a box of tissues and most of them were gone. What did she think of Hudson getting the role? I had just woken up from a nap when I found out, and I thought I was still dreaming, she said. For the most part, Wisconsin dwellers are unapologetic about their sing-song lilt, and Thunder is no exception. To Brewer's surprise, Hudson nailed it on the first try. All of a sudden, this accent came out of her, and I was like, what the hell is that? He said. Hudson explained that she grew up with a nanny, Kathy Heller, who was a proud Milwaukeean. In the late 1990s, Heller became Hudson's assistant, retiring only last year and moving back to the Badger State. I asked Craig, can I lean into this? Are they going to let me do an accent this heavy? Hudson recalled. He responded enthusiastically. Every once in a while, however, Brewer pulled her back. She laughed as she recounted what Brewer would tell her on set when things started to nudge toward mockumentary. Maybe a little butter off that toast. An article here about Kate Hudson refusing to stay in her lane. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Art and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Let's turn to something else. Well, how about this? Cheyenne Jackson gets high on kindness. Cheyenne Jackson considers the Broadway comedy Oh, Mary his favorite gig ever, he said. Playing First Lady, Mary Todd Lincoln's teacher, he is working with Jane Krakowski, his co-star in Xanadu on Broadway and 30 Rock. To be able to use all the colors in your crayon box, all of your comedy, your drama, your musicality, your weirdness, all of it is all packed into one role. That's so rare, said Jackson, who starts a solo concert tour January 30th. Being away from Los Angeles, where he lives with his husband Jason Landau and their 9-year-old twins, Ethan and Willow, is tough, he said, but I really believe it's important for the kids to see their dads reaching their dreams. Jackson elaborates on his favorite things. These are edited excerpts. Number 1, good hang with Amy Poehler. Everybody has a podcast, but there's something about Amy's that makes me instantly feel a rush of serotonin. The title here was Cheyenne Jackson Gets High on Kindness, and these are his 10. Number 2, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. It is the most haunting piece of cinema I've seen in ages. I hope that Jacob Elordi's performance as the monster is remembered come awards season because it's really bold. He's like an animal, but gentle. He's like a baby deer. Number 3, my Dr. Vox vocal warm-up bottle. This is not an ad, though they should pay me as much as I talk about it. It's a game changer. I love to challenge my voice and new warm-ups, warm-downs, and get advice from jazz singers, rockers, opera singers. Me and my light friend, Gavin Creel, were determined to be old men singers without the wobble. So far, so good. Number 4, routine, 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 almost certainly a touch of ADHD, but the same food, same backstage routes at O'Mary, same purified water, same disco dance to Grace Jones tomorrow before curtain. Strict routines don't feel rigid. They give me peace and freedom within the structure so I can fully play and create. Number 5, the smell of markers on newsprint. For the last 25 years, I've found my corner and read the New York Times almost entirely every single Sunday. Then when I'm done, I give it to my daughter, who doodles on it and adds earrings and eyeliner to old white senators in the pictures featured that week. Number 6, Billy, Ella, Lena, Sarah. Like all 7-year-old boys, I was obsessed with the leading ladies of jazz. I went to a yard sale and found this tape with Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Lena Horne, and Sarah Vaughan. I'd never heard voices or singing like that. It was magic. 7, crime TV. I read a study that said if you fall asleep to forensic files or feel comforted by unsolved murder docs, you probably grew up with trauma. That tracks. Number 8, writing. The pandemic turned it into my favorite outlet. 5 notebooks of songs, 2 pilots, 1 feature, and my first book of essays in the works. I got signed by a fancy lit agent who was understandably wary. First submission? On the phone they said, "This is really good." I could tell they were surprised. It felt great. 9, positive affirmations. Before every scene, I center myself and say, "You are ready. You are prepared. You are open to whatever is about to happen." And number 10, doing good. I believe dogs and babies can tell if you're a good person. I'm constantly putting that to the test. My dad taught me to put out into the world only what you expect back, and I practice it daily. I don't do drugs anymore, but when a random baby in a stroller smiles at me, it feels like I just did a bump of coke. And there we are on Cheyenne Jackson getting his high on kindness. Well, moving on. If I can turn the page, will be great. Woo! Social media turns its gaze to the opera. Woo-hoo! The Met has invited dozens of influencers to help it attract a younger online audience. And of course, there are some photos here of people, even I have no idea who they are, but maybe we'll learn about them. The article here is by Adam Nagorny. Taryn Delaney Smith raced back and forth through the rows of seats at the empty Metropolitan Opera House, dressed in a cream-colored gown from the Met Costume Department and holding a candelabra from the Met Props Department. This December morning, she was playing a ghost, an online character familiar to her 1.2 million Instagram followers. "It was always my dream to be a Phantom of the Opera," she said, pulling up her white opera gloves as a camera crew recorded her ghostly moans, which she would post on her account. "The next time you are at the Met Opera, you may not see me, but really remember, I am with you." She stopped and looked at the crew. "Okay, cut." A few hours later, Smith, 29, and Tiffany Singleton, 27, her partner in social influencing, sat in box 29 at the parterre usually set aside for the Met's top donors to tape their podcast, We're Your Girls, a podcast for divas by divas. They had spent hours touring the subterranean levels of the Opera House, and their surprise guest for the show, they told their audience, was Peter Gelb, the Met's general manager. Gelb, 72, seemed heartened by their excitement about opera, even as he gamely corrected their occasional error, such as when they insisted that a mule appears on the Met stage for Puccini's Turandot. "La Boheme," said Gelb, who has run the Met for 20 years. "I'm pretty sure I am actually quite positive." No matter. Smith and Singleton are part of a new cadre of opera promoters recruited from the very online world of social influencers. And just what the Met has been looking for in its relentless effort to convince a broader public, particularly a broader younger public, that opera is accessible and even affordable. We just have to adapt to where our audiences are, said Gillian Brierly, the Met's assistant general manager for marketing and communications. The Met is building relations with influencers, she said, the way we build relations with journalists. Their reach is a huge part of it and the type of audience they are engaging. Smith and Singleton are among 70 social influencers who are promoting the Met and its 25-26 season with as much fervor and innovation as, say, a millennial candidate running for mayor of New York. With their millions of followers on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and their bubbly online presentations, these influencers have offered a new window into what happens under the chandeliers. And they have muscled into a field once commanded by arts and society opinion leaders, not to mention reviewers and writers from newspapers and magazines. This army of influencers, nearly all under 45, have a combined audience of 16 million people by the Met's calculation. Newcomers to opera, many are self-described theater enthusiasts, they have been invited to spend a night at the Met, not just to popular fare like Turandot, but also to more challenging works like Arabella. And they share with their followers their delight and surprise at what they have found. The lack of a dress code, the English language translations on the backs of the seat, the Hollywood-worthy productions and videos, and yes, the existence of cheap seats. The Met found most of the influencers through its advertising agency. Only a handful are paid, but there are plenty of perks and enticements to get them through the Met door. Backstage tours, selfies with opera stars, and invitations to the most exclusive events and openings. Smith and Singleton will be on hand for the New Year's Eve Gala, the premiere of a new production of Bellini's I Puritani, a high society night on the Met calendar. They made a point of talking up the opera after checking with Met staff on how to pronounce it in their podcast with Gelb. The invitations come condition-free, the Met and the influencers said, with no Met approval of content. Most of this is, "We are inviting you," said Ashley Hufford, 35, an influencer. "If you want to make a video, great." "I'm a big theater person," she added, "but honestly, I never saw any opera and it always seemed very inaccessible." Hufford made a 3-minute TikTok video in which she reels through the similarities between Rent, one of her favorite musicals, and La Bohème, the Puccini opera upon which it is based. Kim Hale, who at 57 is one of the older influencers, said she didn't know what to expect when the Met invited her to Turandot. "I was super excited because I had never been to the opera before," she said. "I had a lot of preconceived notions about the opera. It's so long. I'm not going to understand it. Then I realized you watch 45 minutes and drink champagne." This is an unlikely alliance, to put it mildly, between two worlds that exist in very different universes. Met executives are always trying to keep one step ahead of what Jen Luzo, the opera's press director, called this constantly evolving landscape. Some of these new opera-goers are still learning how to pronounce Turandot, while the sight of young influencers twirling on the red carpet steps inside the Met or on the grand terrace in front of the building is no doubt jarring to some of the more tradition-bound attendees. But for the Met, that is a small price to pay. The influencers have been lavish with their reviews, praising the productions, the singing, and the only in New York experience. "It was larger than life," Hale told her followers on Instagram. "Magnificent sets and costumes that took my breath away. It is a far cry from a critic pointing out an ill-conceived plot line, an orchestra struggling to keep pace, or a missed note." Hufford used her TikTok account to document that opening night at the Met, one of the most beautiful buildings in the city, and the premiere of The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Mason Bates. "A superhero opera?" she said on TikTok. As a newish opera fan, I never would have expected to see comic books and opera in the same sentence. But somehow, at the Metropolitan Opera, it not just works, but feels like it was always meant to be. Another influencer, Kaisha Hugili, 35, used her post to highlight the discounted seats that can be found through the luck of a lottery. Did you know that tickets start at $25 for most performances, she says? Hughley, one of a handful of influencers who was paid by the Met, said she approached the assignment with trepidation when asked if she would help promote Janine Tesori's Grounded, which opened the 24-25 season. "This is a new world to me," she said. "When I was invited, I wasn't sure if it was actually a space that was for me. The majority of the old audience is older and white. I'm young and black. It really opened my mind as to what it is." The We're Your Girls podcast was probably the biggest social media production to take place at the Met in the Opera's courtship of influencers, which the Met started in 2019. The podcast, which began in February, promising the ultimate dose of real talk, hilarious shenanigans, and heartwarming sisterhood, has an audience of 300,000 who find it on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Among its followers are Zoran Mamdani and Marcelo Hernandez of Saturday Night Live. With the podcast and their personal social accounts, Smith and Singleton reach an audience of nearly 4 million, according to their producers. Given that, it's little surprise that the Met gave Smith and Singleton the run of the Opera House that day. They arrived with their own crew of producers and videographers and were met by a full crew of Met staff, with the communications department to the security force. They were fussed over by Met hairdressers and makeup artists. They borrowed gowns from Arabella for Singleton and Tchaikovsky's Eugene Onegin for Smith. In costume, their entourage in tow, they were taken all over the vast Met complex, interviewing a cobbler at one stop and a dressmaker at another. This was, Met officials said, the first podcast ever recorded inside the Opera House. When Smith and Singleton arrived in Box 29, they seemed momentarily staggered by the grandeur of it all. "This is bananas," Singleton said. They bounced up and down in excitement in the red velvet chairs as they waited for the more reserved Gelb to come on their set. "When we had first asked if we could do something with the Met Opera, we were just excited in general that they said yes," Smith said into the camera. Little did she imagine that Tiffany and I will be actually spending New Year's Eve here. At that point, the two women briefly joined hands as they turned to the camera and said in unison, "Together!" For the show, E Puritani, Smith said, which you can still buy tickets to, by the way. And that's the article on social media turning its gaze on opera at the Met. Let's remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And we will turn the page again. Oh my. Well, let's go with K-pop. K-pop battled its various demons. The genre peaked in global awareness while the industry's most promising new act was mired in a legal morass. The article here is by John Caramanica. This year, from a distance, the cultural phenomenon that revealed the most about K-pop's place in the global zeitgeist was the Netflix animated film K-pop Demon Hunters. Among the most consumed cultural products of 2025, this parable about good and evil, framed as a tug of war between competing K-pop groups, became the most watched film in Netflix history, and its songs topped the charts here and abroad. It seemed to clearly cement the universal embrace of K-pop as a sound, style, and milieu. But take a slightly closer look, and the fissures beneath this top-level triumph become evident. The true gauge of K-pop's power and the shape of its future growth was playing out between lawyers in the struggle between New Jeans, the most innovative group of the past few years, and its label Adore, a subsidiary of the entertainment conglomerate Hybe, over claims of workplace hostility and creative sabotage. The members of New Jeans tried to break their contract, but in October, a South Korean court upheld its validity. In November, the label announced the return of 2 of the group's members. The other 3 announced their intention to return soon after, although no announcements about the full group have been made since. New Jeans' contract is set to expire in 2029. K-pop is over 3 decades old as a form, and in the past 10 years has asserted itself worldwide, remaking pop music in the macro by out-innovating its competitors. The K-pop industry is highly restrictive, highly regulated, creatively, and largely managed top-down, led by a handful of entertainment conglomerates that have attempted to streamline and scale the creation of pop stars. But K-pop also has become a playground for pop experimentalists and eccentrics, and for some groups, New Jeans among them, musical innovation became crucial to their thrill. Originality of that sort, however, is almost impossible to manufacture at scale, and so 2025 has been a year that underscored the tension between K-pop as an industry and K-pop as an art form, testing its scale and durability as a cultural force. K-pop Demon Hunters cleanly distills what it took to get to this point, and it proves that K-pop is big enough to be gently parodied. In the film, a girl group, Hunter X, is tasked with protecting the world, its fans really, from the encroachment of evil as literalized through zombie-like demons who are sophisticated enough to present as an equally compelling pop group, Saja Boys. The songs are lithe and peppy, and the frenzied relationship between artists and the fans who adore them is played as lightly silly, as if underscoring how fandom can be a force of unquestioning allegiance and dubious good. Read broadly, the plot can symbolize the tension between manufactured pop and artistic freedom, or serve as a cautionary tale about how mass media dulls the receptors of its most voracious consumers, leaving them susceptible to manipulation. The movie is also simply an undeniable smash. Several of its songs became fixtures at or near the peak of the top 100. Hunter X's Golden topped the chart for 8 weeks and is also nominated at the 2026 Grammys for Song of the Year, among other categories. This sign of global visibility is a logical outgrowth of how the last decade has unfolded. It owes heavily to the rise and dominance of BTS, the boy band that became the genre's true global breakout in the 2010s, and whose members have recently completed mandatory military service. In BTS, K-pop found unimpeachable ambassadors, musically nimble, personable, doggedly dedicated to craft. The biggest K-pop story of next year will be the group's returning to recording and touring, which will inject revenue and energy into the industry, but won't be much more than a bandage atop an unhealed wound. The scale of the group's power has been essentially impossible to replicate, and the system that created it has been fragmenting, sometimes for the better. The most literal example of this is the rise of KATSEYE, a girl group whose assembly by Hybe and Geffen Records was recounted on Popstar Academy. KATSEYE, or KATSEYE. KATSEYE, a reality show that streamed on Netflix. It is global by design, with members from various countries, and largely performs in English. Part of the charm of KATSEYE is the way in which it chafes against K-pop formalities. The group's best hit, Gnarly, is a chaotic industrial shredder, and Gabriella is cheekily melodramatic. The group's members, some of them at least, are comfortable with profanity. They starred in a saucy Gap ad. On its recent live tour, KATSEYE blended the metronomic skill set imprinted onto its members by their training with a sense of abandon and mild chaos that would typically have no place at a K-pop performance. This heralds an era in which K-pop is an influence, a starting point, but perhaps not a destination. It's a move echoed by some of the bigger stars of the genre's last wave, for example, Rosé or Blackpink, whose collaboration with Bruno Mars, Apt, came out in late 24 but continued to dominate pop charts well into this year. That was one of numerous collaborations putting K-pop stars in partnership with artists from other genres, an indicator of widening acceptance and also increased tolerance for musical risk. Jisoo and Zayn, J-Hope with Don Toliver and Pharrell Williams, J-Hope with Glorilla, 17 and Pink Pantheress, Jennie and Doechii. There's also a new reality competition on Apple TV premised upon these mutually beneficial alliances, K-pop, in which English language pop stars like Spice Girls, Boyz II Men, and Kylie Minogue team with established K-pop groups to remake their signature songs in K-pop style. These kinds of collaborations take the musical importance of K-pop as a given, but they are also the sort of creative bursts that tend to happen once a genre has reached an era of saturation and needs new oxygen to thrive. Of all the new K-pop acts of the 20s, the internal candidate most likely to expand the reach and sound of the genre has been New Jeans. From 2022 to 2024, it proposed a realignment of K-pop along looser and more musical lines with songs that were gentle, sophisticated, and sweet, while never spilling over to saccharine. But for the last year, the quintet has been navigating contentious legal proceedings over the validity of its contract and the ouster of Min Hee-jin, its creative director and the chief executive of its imprint, Adore. It attempted to rebrand as NJX and performed one concert under that name in Hong Kong in March, but has essentially been silenced and musically sidelined while its claims were assessed in court. The specter of the New Jeans debacle hangs over the industry, both from business and artistic standpoints, but a New Jeans reboot under these conditions is unlikely to be as radical or satisfying as its earlier burst of creativity, whether because of the enforced split from Min, who'd guided the group from its beginning, or the near impossibility of creative freedom under fraught business circumstances. The eventual outcome of the face-off will indicate whether K-pop as an industry is interested in aesthetics or simply scale bottom-up innovation or top-down domination. In the meanwhile, K-pop's mainstream is trapped in a creative cul-de-sac. Groups like Stray Kids, Twice, ENHYPEN, and 17 are commercially thriving, but the musical frameworks they're deploying are redundant and increasingly dull. A promising outlier, Cerulean Verge, a solo EP by Wendy of the girl group Red Velvet, full of bright and slightly cheeky 80s pop. More important, though, there is ample innovation happening in South Korean music outside of the conglomerate system. Much of the best feels as if it's an unspoken dialogue with the K-pop that for many years hungrily ate up influences from abroad and then assembled them into an unlikely and overwhelming new package. That maximalism had a lot in common with the hyperpop production that began to rise to dominance in the late 2010s, and which has found new life in a crop of young Korean artists, Effie the Deep, Kimj, and more, who are making some of the most provocative pop of today. It's the sound of a generation of pathbreakers raised under a suffocating system that they wish to both exist outside of and also indirectly comment on, if only to eye roll. It has shards of K-pop bombast buried deep within, but what's built atop it is novel, challenging, and utterly modern. As the K-pop industry fends off fatigue and anxiety from within, it may have already inadvertently given birth to the sound that will upend it. And that's the end of the commentary on K-pop battling its various demons. Oh my. We're getting close to, well, we're more than halfway. Let's leave it at that. Next article, discussing liberation with my mom, by Robin Pogrebin. After watching a play about the women's movement, a round table with a pioneer, this is what we're talking about here. Oh, we have some old pictures. Blah, blah. Okay. 6 women of various ages sit awkwardly on metal folding chairs placed in a semicircle on the dimly lit basketball court of a local rec center. They are completely naked, clearly uncomfortable, and talking haltingly about what they like and don't like about their bodies. I hate my nostrils, says one. I do love my brain, says another. It's a scar from my C-section, both of my C-sections. I love my tits. This back and forth takes place in a key scene in the new Broadway play, Liberation, which I recently saw with my mother and twin sister. I imagine some audience members considered it an extreme example of the confessional consciousness-raising groups that convened in the 1970s during the women's liberation movement. But the 3 of us recognized the gathering as very real. My mother had been a participant. Letty Cotton Pogrebin, a writer and pioneer of the movement, was part of the team that founded Ms. Magazine with Gloria Steinem. During the playwright Bess Wohl's research for Liberation, she interviewed Letty about her consciousness-raising CR group and topics like equal pay and sexual harassment. My mother also sent Wohl a copy of her Ms. article from 1973 describing the group's nude convening. The women talk about physical vulnerability, Letty wrote, about revealing their bodies for the first time to a man, about seeing other women's bodies, about skin color and texture, and about flesh that is no longer young. Those details, along with many others, including a powerful sense that they were changing the world, made it into Liberation, which opened on Broadway this fall to enthusiastic reviews after an off-Broadway debut in February. Directed by Whitney White, the play explores the promise and failings of feminism through the eyes of the group's leader, Lizzie, a young 70s journalist played by Susanna Flood, who also portrays Lizzie's adult daughter and serves as the contemporary narrator. The play's subject matter has proved timely in a moment when trade-wife content has prompted debate on social media and when divisiveness over abortion rights has intensified after the Supreme Court's 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade. Watching Liberation with my mom and my sister, Abigail Pogrebin, an author, evoked memories of our mother's evolution as an activist, her participation in protest marches and political organizing, and her personal revelations. My mother said she felt pride in the achievements of her cohort, represented by the characters on stage, including women of different racial backgrounds and sexual orientation, who had additional battles to fight. But she also saw in the play the slow pace of progress, given that women still earn 83.6% as much as men. People have often asked me what it was like to grow up as the daughter of a women's movement progenitor, and I've always said that it's all I ever knew. It was the air we breathed, the water we swam in. My sister, our younger brother David, and I took for granted that we could each play with dolls or trains, wear pink or blue, and grow up to be whatever we wanted to be. After the performance of Liberation, my sister, mother, and I sat down with Wohl and her mother, Lisa Cronin Wohl, a writer and Ms. contributor, to talk about what the play brought up for each of us and how it dovetailed with our lives. I started by asking my mother why, when I looked over at her during the curtain call, she was crying. I was seeing my whole life, she said, still choked up. I just felt so buoyed by the part of that final monologue in which she really captured who we were and what we did and what we felt we were doing, and also what we feel has been lost and unraveled. In that monologue, the mother character says, knowing that the things we said and did, the conversations we had, are still here, that they're not over, well, I guess that's the solution. It's the problem and the solution. There were so many characters in this play who are my people, my friends, my CR group, Letty added. People have died and they struggled and they left a mark, but it's kind of like a footprint in the sand, and the ocean comes and takes it away. My sister Abby said Liberation summoned what it was like to grow up in our household, how our mom pushed us in the double stroller as she marched in street demonstrations, how we played with the other Ms. kids in the office's top lot, testing out the non-gender specific toys sent for editor's assessment, how we coveted the mini Milky Way bars my mom kept stashed in her desk drawer, which Steinem, an unrepentant candy fan, regularly sampled. The characters in the play felt familiar to me, Abby said, in a way that was almost cellular. My sister and I were both especially affected by what the narrator's mother says to her daughter about the trade-offs of parenting, as well as some disappointment in her adult daughter's complacency. It was a huge problem for us, the having you, the raising you, and the way you took so much for granted and let so much slide. Not just the political progress, but the community, the solidarity. I don't know where that is now. The play also pointed up the degree to which the term feminist has become freighted. My mother always taught us it simply meant giving men and women equal treatment and opportunity. For our daughter's generation, the label has grown more complicated, and some young women reject it. For Abby, the play also echoed her own 2011 oral history about Ms. for New York Magazine, retracing the limitations that used to define a woman's life, such as the inability to get a credit card in her own name. We couldn't get a loan at the bank. We couldn't buy a home, Margie says in Liberation, adding that at my high school, girls used to play basketball on half the court because everyone thought we couldn't run the full way across. Wohl, 50, said that speaking with my mother had unlocked something important. I think it was Gloria who called you and said, "It'll never be over," after Reagan was elected. Wohl added an apparent reference to Ronald Reagan's open opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment, and that line, "It'll never be over." I just remember you saying that. Let's remind you that you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Regarding the Naked CR group, "I know Mom did that," Abby said dryly, "and I don't really want to imagine it." Wohl credited her mother's influence on the script as well, how she was willing to have all of the hard, honest conversations with me. She didn't flinch when I told her that I would be sharing really personal, raw things, Wohl said. She kept telling me to just go for it. Don't hold anything back. Liberation also grapples with ambivalence about marriage, suggesting that freedom can sometimes be at odds with partnership. It's almost impossible to have both, one character says. Cronenwald said that because she had been reluctant to get married, she related to the lines spoken by Margie about the imbalance intrinsic to traditional marriage. "Take it from me, whatever you do, do not become a wife, because no matter what they say, the expectations and the rules are not equal. They just are not equal, and they never will be." Abby said she had trouble relating to that tension in the play, the idea that getting married was a capitulation to sign on to an oppressive institution, because our parents modeled a teamwork and mutual respect that Abby has managed to find with her own husband. "I didn't grow up with the sense that it was somehow losing something to find a partner," she said, "or that it was anti-feminist to get married." The play also deals with the movement's racial divides. In one scene, Celeste, Crystalline Lloyd, an intellectual and the only black member of the predominantly white group, is confronted by Joanne Kayla Davion, another black woman, who briefly wanders into the group's meeting about whether the white members will ever consider Celeste an equal participant. Joanne: "They'll go climb the ladder, go write their novels while they make it big. Who's going to be cleaning their houses?" Celeste: "Not me." Joanne over: "Who's going to be watching their children? Their rise depends on keeping us down." Celeste: "That's why we're pushing for universal child care, unionizing domestic workers, welfare reform." Joanne: "You call me when you get all of that." Letty noted the honesty of this exchange in dealing with the real schisms of push-pull within the women's movement. If they were part of us, they were critiqued by their own, she added, of early black feminists. And if they were not part of us, they had to make their own movement. They made their own movement, but we were then bifurcated, weakened. We were just pulled apart. I asked everyone how they came away thinking about activism, whether public resistance is worth the personal risk, and whether they could imagine taking to the streets now. In the play, Celeste questions whether protesting changes anything, given entrenched patriarchy and potential backlash. I don't know if you can just ask people to walk out on their jobs, their families, she says. Letty sighed. I guess I'm really feeling exhaustion, having to do everything all over again, she said. Although I recognize that the world is different from when we all started the struggle, I never dreamed that we could possibly lose a constitutional right. We got very lazy about our organizing to protect reproductive freedom, she added. We didn't realize it wasn't rock solid. I personally felt nostalgic for the play's spirit of sisterhood, the strength and support that Wool's women derive from one another. While I have fortifying female friendships, gathering a group of women in a room on a regular basis, talking about our lives, is rare. I asked Wool whether she considered her play political, a call to action, an effort to catalyze change. Seeing young women come and learn about the time of Letty and my mom, it's a consciousness raising for them, she said. The play is not meant to shove a point of view down anyone's throat. I actually think that's not good theater. But bringing people in community and having this exchange of energy that's so alive, and bringing back these stories from a time when regular people got together and did things to move the world forward, she continued, to me, that is a political act. And that is the article on discussing liberation with my mom. A different time, obviously. Okay. I'm looking for something short because we do not have too much time. Once again, having trouble turning the page. Oh dear. Well, we'll do as much of this as we can. This is on television. He's laughing off all of the haters. Marcelo Hernandez, who once thought his comedy career was over, has a Netflix special in January. Here we go. When you are seen on Saturday Night Live nearly every week, as Marcelo Hernandez is, you are bound to attract a few haters. Some don't like it when your breakout character Domingo appears in the opening sketch of the show. Some gripe when you imitate a white guy with an exaggeratedly dorky accent. And others grumble when your dialogue is in Spanish. And who knows how any of these viewers will react when Hernandez tells them in a new Netflix stand-up special that they shouldn't treat Latinos like depraved criminals because, as he puts it, Latinos do fun, exciting crimes. Sometimes Hernandez is dealing directly with these detractors on social media. For a time, he said his mother would chase them off using a fake Instagram account, though not at his instruction. Other times, he's simply conjuring them in his mind for motivational purposes. When I asked him if he'd come into SNL with a hunger to contribute, Hernandez said he'd been forged by a process that inoculated him against critics. If they don't like this version of me, he said, sipping a cup of tea at a Midtown Manhattan steakhouse, I wonder what they would have said about 2020, Marcello. If you don't like this, he said, leaning across the table and widening his eyes for emphasis, you have no idea. This is the best it's been. In 2020, Hernandez, a new college graduate who had given up his lifelong love of soccer to pursue a performing career, saw the comedy industry effectively shut down by the pandemic. Reduced to selling medication by phone while he lived with his mother, he feared his showbiz dreams were over before he even got a chance to pursue them. Hernandez, now 28, bounced back. He hustled his way into stand-up gigs, opening for comics like Tim Dillon, Gilbert Gottfried, and Mark Vieira. In 2020, he was selected for the new Faces of Comedy lineup at Montreal's Just for Laughs festival, and he was cast on SNL later that year. At the start of his stand-up special, American Boy, which debuts January 7th, he dances victoriously with his mother on the stage of the Olympia Theater in Miami. But the precarious sensation of dangling from a bottom rung is never far from his mind. I always remembered that feeling, he said. That feeling 100% drives me very hard. Hernandez was pushing himself hard on a recent Tuesday, doing double duty between an SNL writing session and post-production work on American Boy. He spoke with intensity of someone who has gotten many of the things he always wanted and now realized. He realizes he must be in many places at once to satisfy the obligations that come with them. American Boy lets Hernandez introduce himself beyond SNL, tells the story of his upbringing. He was born in Miami and was a handful while being raised mostly by his mother, who fled Cuba and lived in Spain and the Dominican Republic before immigrating to the United States. He recounts getting diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. As Hernandez says in the routine, "Everybody told me I have ADD, and I told my mom I have ADD, and she said, nope, so I don't have ADD." Though his mother is a prominent foil in his stand-up, Hernandez spoke admiringly of her in our conversation. "You really can't judge her because she was doing her best," she said. He said she was learning the language, learning the culture, trying to figure it all out, and her kid was kind of a little psycho. In an email, Hernandez's mother, Isabel Cantella, wrote that she was proud to be a character in his comedy. "When your children honor you in their own way, it feels like a pat on the back from God, telling you that you did a good job even after everything you had to go through," she said. Hernandez's parents split up by the time he was 5. He remains close with his father, who is from the Dominican Republic, and whom Hernandez credits for his sense of humor. Hernandez explained that Dominican comedy was distinguished by a lot of sarcasm. "We speak very fast," he said. "It's a big personality." As a student, Hernandez showed promise as a soccer player, but a high school drama teacher introduced him to John Leguizamo's character piece Mambo Mouth, setting Hernandez on a path to a state-level championship at a Florida student drama competition and dreams of stage stardom. After graduating from John Carroll University in Ohio and riding out the pandemic, Hernandez spent many months sleeping on couches, selling tickets for stand-up shows to strangers on McDougal Street in New York, in return for precious minutes of stage time at clubs like the Comedy Cellar. When he joined the SNL cast in 2022, he wasted no time in making his presence felt. His repertoire of memorable characters includes Domingo, the not-so-secret lover of a bride, whose friends sing parodic pop songs describing their trysts, and the movie guy, a cinema usher who discusses films he hasn't seen in broken English. Lorne Michaels, the SNL creator and executive producer, said Hernandez was the real thing. "He was brought up well, he has real values, and he's solid," Michaels said. "I don't want to gush, but he's gotten better every year." Oh dear, we have to cut to the chase here. In our conversation, Hernandez said he could never be made to feel ashamed of his upbringing, and he thinks the scrutiny the SNL spotlight has brought will subside as he introduces himself to audiences more fully. "I'm a kid of immigrants," he said. "I'm the first American in my family. So do what you will. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to be the best version of myself. And I think the more people learn about me, the less I'll need to answer." And there you have it. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the from the Sunday, December 28th, 2025 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section. Your reader is Ben Louise, and we thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the re-airing of this morning's Buffalo News. Following that at 6 p.m. is the Buffalo News Viewpoints. Stay tuned for this reading and more throughout the day. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or